Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Survivor Becomes a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 76, But Maury Point of View. It was a surprise, to say the least, when Basti tackled me down to the ground. The cubs were fine, though Grim seemed surprised by the whole exchange. But in the end, he was just happy to be involved in whatever was happening. The people were taken aback but appeared to be more confused and perhaps even amused at the scene developing before them. Basti's tail had flicked this way and that, her whole body seemingly rumbling with delight as I felt her unintentionally flexing her claws into my back. Zasta spoke up first, looking pleasantly amused as he looked between Basti and me before looking back at me. "I suppose there are others you left out regarding your latest change," he mused before looking at the others. "Come along now, everyone. No point standing around. We have work to do." This earned some smirks of amusement from some of the adults, but the kids were just happy to see Basti stopping by. The cubs and Grim lounged around for a few moments, but they also dispersed, going off to play with the other kids or hang around their mentors. "So, I guess you're cozy where you are?" I asked as I glanced back up at Basti. While the new wooden body was definitely strong, I was not in any sort of position to properly resist or squirm free. Not that I was actively trying to do so. She rumbled out another purr before leaning in and whispering once more, "Consider it as punishment for not telling me that you were planning on getting a physical body." She mused almost mischievously as she now began to knead her paws into my back. Well, it felt nice in a way. The sensation of relief wasn't really there, considering that I wasn't really made of meat like a normal person. Though, as her paws kneaded against me, I could sense that she had a realization as she let out a huff at that sounded vaguely disappointed. "You're made of wood?" she asked quietly, confusion plain in her voice, as she let herself flop down against me and rested her chin atop my head. "Why are you wood?" Well, probably because this was all rather impromptu," I replied with fake amusement. "Revia surprised me with an avatar, as she put it. A real body is probably a long way away, but for now this'll have to do if I want to be mobile." I just laid there for a time being, the pressure of the weight being quite apparent to me. However, it wasn't uncomfortable, the sensation of pain apparently not registering. "However, considering that I can now leave my bubble, I was considering joining you on your mission to the hegemony. I'll follow from afar and see what I can do while you assume the role of Dahlia," I mentioned, a smile on my face as I slowly shifted around to look up at her more directly. Basti's eyes dilated with anticipation at the suggestion, humming some more as she stood and slinked off of me before lying in the dirt. I really like that idea," she mentioned as her eyes flicked and wiggled. Now that I'm freed from the confines of my right hand, I go about standing while dusting myself off. "It'll be interesting to see the world beyond the confines of my forest. I have memories of a place, but I'd like to see it for myself. Maybe make some connections and find some friends." If I were flesh and blood, I could swear my heart would be racing with the idea of an expedition. It had been years since I'd ventured into new territory. Even the warehouse that got me killed had been mapped, though obviously it wasn't adequately scouted. But that was beside the point now. Basti hummed thoughtfully at that before nodding. "There are many targets, as you know. It'll take a lot of work to deal with them all of them," she mentioned, her tail lashing and curling as she considered the task before us. I couldn't help but agree. I've dismantled many groups before. It usually just requires the removal of leaders or key figures in a group to create disorder and leave hostile groups in shambles. However, the difference here is that this is a civilized land, with a lot more people and stable influence and structure. Nothing like the volatile apocalypse that I'd grown accustomed to. So Basti was right. It would take a lot of time, at least until I find a suitable figurehead or a faction to oppose these slavers for me. Hence, the need for me to go and try to find friends and allies. "It'll be a good way to gauge our neighbors and the people who make up the general populace." Basti seemed to nod intently, and I could tell that she was at least getting most of the concepts I'm running by her, probably thanks to Dahlia's memories. "Again, it just sounds like a lot of work. What about home, the mountain and the haven? Are you just going to leave them be?" she asked as her head tilted curiously. I considered that, soon glancing over at the faint, intangible thread that connected the body to my core at the top of the mountain. I think I can manage to maintain both, though I'm certain I can rely on Ururu to look over the home front for the day-to-day if need be. I considered as I looked back over at her. I may be inhabiting this body, but it's still only an avatar. My true body is in my core at the top of the mountain. I'm fairly certain I can change my focus between this body and my bubble of influence, I explained, guessing for now, as I didn't want to experiment out in the open on the off chance that returning back to my core would make my avatar collapse like a sack of potatoes. This appeased Basti as she nodded intently. I see. I suppose I ought to get back to my training if we are to leave as soon as possible, she considered, seemingly a little somber, as she watched our cubs among the people before looking at our mountain. I don't think I've ever truly had a place to call home. My memories of life weren't exactly clear. All I knew was that I was alone, and my hunts were poor in the last few weeks with my cubs on the way, she said softly. I knew of her life before me, though it was interesting to hear from her perspective. As she spoke, I decided to sit down beside her, my legs crossed as I scooted closer, before reaching out and gently running my wooden fingers through her head fur. Basti seemed to smile softly while shifting around as she laid her head on my lap and continued to speak. I went up that mountain to die that day. Something in my basic animalistic mind didn't want my cubs to be eaten after I'd passed. I would have preferred that they starved rather than end up as someone else's meal, she admitted as she nuzzled into my stomach. But then there was you, my small little bead in the dirt, and you aided Basmori for no reason other than you felt like it. I knew somehow that I could leave them in your care, and you would have watched over them as I entered my final sleep. She then rolled over onto her side before looking up at me while still resting her head on my lap and leaning into my touch, a smile forming on her feline face. But there you went again, not allowing me to even have that rest. You had my life, and you gave it back freely, even at the cost of yourself. Time and time again, you provided for and protected our cubs more than any other mate ever would have, she said, her voice rumbling with evident affection. I suppose now that I've had time to understand my new awareness, I can see that my affections have been rather one-sided, she considered as her tail curled and her ears flicked. She sounded more somber, but not too much as she gazed up into my eyes. I hope that you'll continue to care and look after us, even if my affections are unrequited, she said softly, now almost murmuring as she huffed softly and proceeded to pull away. Even if Basti had just been above average in intelligence for an animal until a few days ago, she was surprisingly mature and wise now. I highly doubt at all that was simply due to the influence of Dahlia's memories, so that means that she had been wise and mature all on her own. I didn't let her get too far as I came up beside her and patted her upper back. This caused her to stop as she looked up at me, settling down as she watched me intently while her mind swirled with emotions, though she maintained a stoic expression. Basti, let me just say that I do care for you as my trusted friend, partner, and ally. I started off as I took a knee to be closer to eye level with her, even if she did have to look down at me now. However, I recognize your feelings for me, and I will not ignore them. All I ask is that you give us time. I want you to get to know me as a person, and I will like the chance to get to know you as you are now, a person like myself, I explained as I offered a small smile. Is that all right with you? I asked gently as I held her gaze. Basti hummed thoughtfully, returning the smile as she leaned in and pressed her forehead against mine before quickly trotting away. She soon stopped a little ways away and glanced back at me as she spoke. I suppose it'll have to do for now, she replied quietly, one of her ears spluttering with delight as she hurried off. I couldn't help but smile as I watched her go. I could sense that she was in a much better mood than a moment ago. Getting to my feet, I make my way over to the part of the clearing where the tents had been set up. All but 2 of them had been taken down at this point, everything else having been loaded onto various drakes. Drake wardens and imperial ladies move around, working to clean up after themselves, as it were. I, of course, felt many eyes on me, though nobody actively approached me at first. That was until Tobias made his way over with a grin on his face. So would Mori. I didn't think that I would be seeing anything like this anytime soon, he mentioned as he came up beside me and watched his subordinates work on packing up. You certainly got a rather striking figure, seeing you now. I have no doubts that you are certainly a capable warrior. I couldn't help but flash a grin as I looked over at Tobias. I could tell that he wasn't paying me any sort of lip service and was sincere with his words. Well, not exactly in the flesh, and while I appreciate the vote of confidence, my combat experience is limited to a type of monster called a zombie, as well as a variety of mutant variants of zombie and normal human beings. I have no doubts I'll need to reevaluate the skills and techniques in my repertoire for mana-enhanced warriors and magic users, not to mention all the strange and unique beasts and monsters I may have to encounter. Tobias looked curious about my initial comment, so I opted to hold out my hand to him. He takes it up after a moment, and his brow quirks with mild surprise, almost immediately bringing his other hand over to feel up the rest of my arm. "Wood, how interesting," he mentioned, while trailing off as he tried to examine my features with his eyes alone while pulling away. "Well, you certainly look like flesh and blood. This is some incredible spellcraft for sure," he mused kindly as he met my gaze once more. I couldn't help but chuckle softly at his reaction as I nodded intently. "Well, I have Revaya to thank for my current condition. She exhausted a considerable amount of mana to craft this avatar for me," I said, letting my arm fall to my side. Tobias nodded intently before smiling a little more as he looked out at his subordinates again. "As for your combat experience, I'm sure you'll have little issue adapting to new enemies. You are already a considerably powerful being after all." He then shot me a glance and smirked a bit. "Don't forget that you are also a mana-enhanced warrior, as well as a magic user of a kind. Just train yourself in your new capabilities, and you should be able to carry yourself just fine amongst the rest of us," he expressed, sounding rather sincere as he patted my shoulder. It felt oddly comforting being advised by an even older and more experienced man than myself. I'm reminded of that saying, to beware of an old man in a profession where others die young. I suppose it applies to both of us, but Tobias does seem to have at least a decade on me. "Well, keep that in mind," I reply, with a bit of a smile as I look over at him again. "When do you think you'll be back?" Tobias looked at the skyline for a moment before looking over at me once more. 2, maybe 3 weeks. I still need to inform the commander of the southern border of my findings here, but considering the circumstances and our current lack of a place to call home, I'm certain I'll have no qualms about making the journey here," he explained as he looked over his arm and absently fastened some of the straps on his braces. "We will also need time to commission and escort some builders to come out here to start working on the wooden fort and living arrangements, which will need to be completed before winter starts in full. So all in all, lots to do," he mused with a mock sigh of exhaustion and a shrug before flashing a smirk. "Thankfully, I can leave most of the more difficult work to the young ones, so there's that." I couldn't help but return the smirk and chuckle of amusement. "Yes, I suppose that is the perk of having both age and experience," I mused before spotting Historietta making her way over. I glanced back to Tobias and held up my hand again. "Stay safe on your way out. I'll see you soon." Tobias glanced over at Historietta before nodding as he firmly took up my hand and shook it, before lowering his head in a show of respect. "Thank you again for welcoming us in your land. I'm looking forward to our next meeting," he expressed sincerely before pulling away and joining the other Drake Wardens in the final check of their equipment. Historietta approached as she smiled up at me. "Well, I suppose this is goodbye for now," she said as she bumped her fist against my chest. "Take care of yourself, old man. I can't wait for you to visit the capital. Hopefully, I'll have some stuff for you to use by then," she gushed with a mischievous look. "I can't wait for another talk. Maybe we'll have some more interesting stories next time we meet," she mentioned with a clap of her hands. I offered a chuckle as I decided to return the gesture by gently bumping her shoulder with my fist. "Be careful what you wish for. There's a reason 'may you live in interesting times' was often used as a curse," I mused. "But yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. See you then," I offer as I take a step back. She also took a couple steps back, turning to leave, before stopping and casting a glance back at me. "Don't forget, you now have a friend in a high place. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call on me. I'll do what I can," she insisted, sounding rather serious now before offering a small smile again. I couldn't help but grin a bit before bobbing my head in understanding. "Sure, the same to you. After all, if you need something done and don't know who to turn to, just let me know. I'll be there." Historietta grinned at that, apparently genuinely happy by my offer, as she turned and joined the Drake Wardens and the ladies-in-waiting. The group now mounted the drakes before quickly taking to the skies and heading for the horizon. I watched them for a while more, though soon enough I'm back in the moment as I rubbed back my wooden head before looking around. What to do first? Honestly, now that I'm really thinking about it, I'm just itching for a fight. It isn't long until I spot my target and make my approach with a grin on my face as I tap his side. The massive bullkin, getting startled by my apparent silent approach as he looked over at me from his seated position, chewing audibly as he crunched down on a hard vegetable of some kind.
"Good morning. How may I serve you?"
he asked with measured deference while maintaining eye contact. I could feel my imaginary heart pounding in anticipation of what could come next as I flashed a grin, and I was as charming as I could manage.
"Hey, Rhiannon, mind sparring with me?"
End of chapter. I would like to thank the T5 peeps, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, Leslie 517, Red Panda 121, Cold War Boomerbotham, Lightsjoc, Dragzoon W.R.E, Lord Azrekahl, Severin Cerberus, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.